All right, guys, we're going to talk about key features of graphs. That's a lot of words for us taking a look at what this is and what this particular graph is showing, and then pointing some things out about it. All right, I'm going to mark this graph up just as a way for us to figure it out. Let me make sure I have my writing utensil here in red. Good. All right, so if I look at this graph, what this is about a roller coaster. There's a height above the ground as the roller coaster, or as the roller coaster moves along the track. All right, so as it goes a certain distance, you can see how high it is above the ground. So for example, at this point, let's just say 500 feet on the track, it's about right here, somewhere around 30 to 40 feet, right? Somewhere between 30 and 40. At 250, it's at about 110 feet. So it just kind of goes up and then it goes down, and then it goes up and then it goes down. Over some distance, we can find out based on this function just how high it is. A couple of things. Notice that first off, it starts off at a distance of 0 and it goes a distance of 1250. So we could talk about the domain since it's continuous. The domain, and actually I'm not going to write that right there. We'll do the domain in a little bit. But we can talk about the domain and the range. We've had some practice with the domain and the range so far. Having a hard time with this over here. Where is it? That's why. Hidden. All right, so we know about the domain and the range, but because of my space here, let me hold off on that for a second. Let me point out that there is an absolute maximum, right? There is the absolute highest it goes. We call that point the absolute max. That means that's the absolute highest point on it. Now, if we look at the minimums, the opposite, there is an absolute minimum here and here. We're going to assume that both of those are 10. So since that is the absolute lowest, we call that the absolute minimum. Now, there are some other things as we go. So over a period of time, like let's just say from like 0 feet to I don't know, say 1,000 feet, there is a maximum here, and then it goes down, then it goes back up to another maximum. And just like here, it goes down to a minimum, but it's not the absolute minimum. We call these things something slightly different. This thing right here is called a relative minimum. And we call this thing right here a relative maximum. Now, what's the difference? Relative to this certain area here, based on this general area, you see that there is a change. It kind of goes down and then goes up. That's a relative minimum. This absolute max is also a relative max. I'm going to say relative to in parentheses, because you see that it kind of goes up and it goes down. Like when it starts changing direction, there is a maximum or a minimum depending on where it is. So this is a relative max, that's a relative min. This is an absolute minimum, but there is no like changing of going up or down, so it is not a relative minimum. Same thing here. So that's one big key, relative minimum versus absolute minimum. First off, this thing right here, I should have gone back and done this first. The distance along the track, this is on the x-axis. We know this is the x-axis. The actual height that this thing goes is based on the distance. Since we input the distance, we call this it's right here, the independent variable, right? The domain gives us the independent variable. The range over here, the thing that is the output, gives us the dependent variable. All right, so the independent variable is x, the dependent variable is y, because the output depends on the input. Now, in addition to that, we could talk about, like I said, the domain and the range. Let me scroll up a little bit. Where can I find some space? Let me make it a little smaller maybe, and maybe right over here. The domain and the range. I'm going to do it quickly because I see the time. The domain and the range. The domain goes from 0 to 1250, 0 to 1250, and they are both included. And the range goes from 10 up to 110, 10 to 110 inclusive.